Right, I'm going to share my screen because otherwise, let's go through to the British Legal Centre website, give you something to look at. Right. This course is aimed at giving you the essential skills of legal English that you will need in your work. I'll just let Oliver in as well. We're not going to deal with highly specific legal topics, such as how to conduct a merger and acquisition, or how to negotiate as a lawyer. We're going to deal with basic legal English. Now, you know that English language is different from legal English. This is because of historical reasons. Some of them date back 2,000 years to when the Romans invaded Britain and imposed Latin as the national language and Roman law as the law of the country. Let's stop that for a moment. Oops. Because of that, there's a lot of Latin still in our legal English. Then, around the 6th and 7th centuries, 6 and 700 AD, there were invasions of various Germanic tribes, the Frisians, the Jutes, the Angles and the Saxons. The Angles and the Saxons pushed out the Frisians and the Jutes and took over the middle of England. They pushed out the original inhabitants, the Celts, to the west of the country. And the Angles and the Saxons formed together into one nation, forming a new language, Anglo-Saxon, which had its own grammar rules. But the law continued to use Latin with Latin grammar. And because the Frisians, because the Jutes at one stage arrived before the Angles and the Saxons, some of the grammar in the Anglo-Saxon language was from the Jute language. This obviously made things very complicated. And then, to make things even worse, the Vikings who'd settled in northern France around 950 AD formed themselves into a group called, not the Norsemen, but the Normans, speaking a strange kind of Viking French. And they invaded Britain and took it over in 1066 AD, 956 years ago this year. And so they brought their language with them, and that also became involved in the law. And again, it had the ancient Norse Viking traditions of grammar. So legal English has language from ancient Rome, from 1,000 years ago with the Angles and the Saxons, and from the Norman French, which gave us words like lease, tort, tortfeasor. All these words are completely unknown to English people who are not lawyers. And so, although you all speak English to some degree, legal English is a totally different language. We're going to look at some of the vocabulary you will need to know to be able to understand what your clients and the other lawyers are talking about. We're also going to look at the simple principles of effective legal writing, because legal writing is not writing to show how much English you know. It's writing to convey ideas, communicate information, concepts, questions with the greatest possible clarity. And also, during this course, we're going to look at some of the basics of contract drafting, document drafting, because if any of you obtain work with a legal company in the UK, you will be required to draft legal documents. It's almost certainly going to be part of your work. So I'm going to show you the basics of how to do this. There's no need to be afraid of it. All it takes is time and common sense. I'll just let Marina in. And then with time, common sense, and the principles which I'm going to show you in this course, you should be able to draft effective contracts. Now, I think this course is going to last about 30 lessons. We'll probably have 1 or 2 lessons each week, depending on how everybody feels about their time in the evenings. And it's important to me that you speak during the lessons. Otherwise, of course, I'm just lecturing to a computer screen, which is not exactly very interesting for me. So what we're going to start with is basic legal writing and legal English. What we're going to look at this evening is something called the active voice. You may have noticed already that I tend to use a consistent, similar grammar pattern in most of my sentences. It's the same with all us native English speakers, whether we're in South Africa or Australia or Canada or India. We all use the same grammar pattern 90% of the time. And it's a very simple grammar pattern. We're going to look at that this evening, the active voice. What we don't want you to do is use the Latin grammar of the passive voice. The passive voice is not wrong, it just needs more words to express the idea, and it is a more complicated grammar structure, so there's a greater chance that you'll make a mistake before you reach the full stop. So I'm going to show you basically how to write clearly, effectively, without making any mistakes. This is what your clients want to see, and it's certainly what potential employers want to see. That you don't make mistakes, that they don't have to sit there and read everything you write before they allow you to send it out from the law company. Now, the other thing we're going to look at is, I want you to write with verbs. Lawyers, including native English speakers, tend to use what we call nominalizations. That's an English teacher's word. This means rather than just write with verbs, they take the process, then they use the noun for the name of the process. They don't pay money, they make a payment. They don't complete a matter, they achieve completion of the matter. It takes more words, it sounds very pompous, and it's much more effective and easier to write with verbs. So those are the 2 things we're going to start off with this evening. So there will be some little exercises, and I want you to join in. Because there are so many, I think I'm going to have to ask you to write your answers in the chat box rather than speak. Now, a couple of rules about this course. First of all, please feel free to ask any questions about legal writing, legal English, contract drafting, or contract law at any point during any of the lessons. The more interactive it is, the better I like it. Second, I probably have a wider vocabulary in English than you do. So if I use a word or a phrase that you do not understand, then please tell me and I will explain it. English is a very idiomatic language. We use all sorts of strange idioms which get in the way of the legal information. Words, phrases like, I heard it from the horse's mouth. What does that mean? Or here's another one. It's just not cricket. What on earth does that mean? Okay. I think we've got our wires crossed. What on earth is that? So try not to use these phrases. But if I use them by mistake, because I'm not concentrating, tell me and I will explain. Right. Now what I'm going to do is this. I'm now going to share my screen and bring up a presentation which has got some exercise in it. And I want you to follow this and then let me show you the text first of all, talk you through it, and then we'll deal with some exercises. Right, so let's begin by sharing my screen. Now let's bring up this about the active voice. Right, this is from the legal writing course. Let's increase the size of it. Let's move this to the side. Right, now you've noticed already I tend to use the same grammar pattern in 90% of my sentences. It's the same grammar pattern that we all use and which lawyers should use as well to make things easy for their clients to understand. Don't forget, although you might struggle with English, clients struggle with understanding the law. So the easier we can make our messages for them to understand, the easier it is, the better they'll like it. So the active voice consists of the subject, the noun for the name of the person or the thing that's doing something, followed immediately, the next word will be the main verb, what the subject is doing. And then you'll bring in the rest of the information, which will usually include the object. We should bring the object in as soon as possible, because this is who or what something's being done to. So this is a very simple, practical style of writing and speaking. Who's doing it, what they're doing, and who they're doing it to. Subject, verb, object. Now, here's an example in a legal sentence. The court decision. Court decision, that's a multi-word noun. That's the object. That's the subject. That's the subject. Will depend. That's the verb. On the judge's interpretation. That's a multi-word noun. That's the object. The judge's interpretation of what? We then bring in the rest of the information of clause 4 of the contract. So you'll notice it was subject, verb, object. There it is. Now, why do we do this? Well, the point is we can expand this sentence and bring in more information, but it's much more likely that the reader or the listener will understand the further information if they understand what is going on in the sentence. What is this sentence about? So this sentence is all about the judge's interpretation of clause 4 of the contract. Here's a sentence expanding it. By the way, I'm going to send you each of these presentations that we look at. So it's great if you take notes to ask questions, but you'll get all these materials plus a recording of the lesson, probably tomorrow morning. Here's an expanded version of this sentence. Court decision will depend upon the judge's interpretation of clause 4 of the contract. We know that, right? Now, here's the rest of the information. As this section deals with the payments which are still owing. Well, now it's very easy to understand this extra information. This section deals with the payments which are still owing because we understand now why clause 4 is so important. But imagine I didn't use the active voice. Imagine the main verb, depend, appeared in the sentence before the subject, the court decision. This would turn it into the passive voice. Imagine I didn't use the active voice like this. Imagine I said this. The section dealing with the payments which are still owing is clause 4 of the contract. And so depending upon the judge's interpretation of it, the court decision will follow. Well, now who's going to understand that? I mean, maybe another lawyer would, but maybe an English-speaking lawyer would, but not otherwise. By putting it in the active voice, the subject, followed by the main verb, followed by the object, it keeps it simple for people to understand what's happening, and then the rest of the information follows, and we understand the rest of the information more easily. Now, we use this in 90% of our writing, even in contracts. Here's an active voice sentence from a contract. The supplier, that's the object, that's the subject, isn't it? Who's doing it? Will provide, that's what they're doing, that's the verb. And vehicles, that's who or what it's being done to. And then the rest of the information. The supplier will provide vehicles which are suitable for the purchaser's requirements, which will be found in the list of requirements contained in Schedule 2 of this contract. Well, although it's a subject, verb, object sentence, if you're writing a contract for the common law, it's usually best to have just one idea per sentence. So this sentence would be far better if we broke it down into 2 sentences, each with a subject, verb, object sequence. One idea in each sentence, like this. The supplier will provide vehicles, and then the rest of the information, which are suitable for the purchaser's requirements. That's one idea. Next idea. These requirements, that's the subject, will be found, that's the verb, in the list, that's the object. And where is this list? It's contained in Schedule 2 of this contract. So even when we're drafting contracts, it's better to use the subject verb of the active voice rather than the passive voice. So remember, the subject is the thing or person doing something. The main verb is what they're doing, and the object is who or what they're doing it to, or who or what is affected by it. Keep them as close together as possible and keep them at the beginning of the sentence. Let all the other information come later. Now, as I said, we could even use it in a contract. You're probably aware that in companies in the West, you are a member of the company because you own 1 share. You are now a member of the company. And it's quite frequent in contracts for the employment of directors of companies that there is a provision which requires them to sell all their shares in the company when they stop being a director. This is so they don't risk the temptation to use their inside knowledge of the company to deal with the shares as inside traders. So here's a sentence, a 1-sentence clause from the contract of employment of a director. Now, none of the words are particularly complicated, but it's too long. Imagine you were writing this to a lawyer in Mongolia, but they don't speak English as well as you. They'd have trouble understanding the long sentence. Here it is. If any member of the board retires, the company, at the discretion of the board, and after notice from the chairman of the board, to all the members of the board, at least 30 days before executing this option, may buy, and the retiring member must sell the member's interest in the company. Now, there's a style of writing in English which we call left-right writing. It's very useful for lawyers. The way it works is we use the first sentence of the paragraph or the first part of a sentence to tell the reader what is going on. And then we use the rest of the sentences in the paragraph to expand upon the information in the topic sentence, the first sentence. So when you look at this lengthy text, in essence, essentially what it's really saying is the company may buy a retiring member's interest. And all the rest of it is how we go about it. There's got to be notice. There's got to be at least 30 days notice. The notice has to go to all the members of the board. And the retiring member has to sell if the option is exercised. Well, let's cut this up into subject, verb, object sequence sentences, and you see if it's easier to follow. Now, notice something. Although these are only slides, it's taken me 5 lines of writing to include this on the slide. So I'm going to break it up into subject, verb, object sentences. Now, the first one is shown at the bottom of the slide. That's the topic sentence. It tells you what you're going to read about in the paragraph. The company may buy, subject, verb, a retiring member's interest. Object, multi-word noun, object. So, there it is. First sentence. Second sentence. The decision, subject. Is, that's the main verb. Is, at the option, object. Whose option? Option of the board. The chairman, subject, must give notice, kind of verbal phrase or verb, to all board members, object. And when must it be given? At least 30 days before the purchase. So you see under the subject, verb, object, and then the rest of the information. And finally, the retiring member, subject, must sell, verb, if the option, object, is exercised. Now, which is the easier text to follow? The one with the short sentences, isn't it? Takes less brain power. Easier to write, easier to follow. Now, notice the original, which was in the passive voice, took 5 lines of writing. When you use the active voice, you will tend to cut down the length of your sentences by around 20%. You'll get a lot more written, a lot more quickly, and probably with very few grammar mistakes by using the active voice. Okay. So let's have a little exercise. Let me just escape from this for a moment. Now, let me just increase the size of this. Let's move this out of the way a little, that's better. Right. So this is all about the active voice and the passive voice. Here's a passive voice sentence. The poacher was shot by the farmer. Okay, who's performed the action? The subject has, the farmer has. And what's the verb? Well, shot. You'll notice that the person doing it appears after the verb. This is what we call the passive. We have to wait until the end of the sentence to find out who did it. Or worse still, especially in contracts, we have what is called the double passive. The poacher, meaning the person who stole animals from somebody else's land, the thief, I should make that easier. The thief was shot. Who by, you'll ask? What for? Why? The passive voice tends to leave a lot of questions unanswered. Whereas if the active voice be the farmer, subject, shot, verb, the poacher, the thief, object. And we tend to know why he shot the poacher, the thief, because presumably the thief was stealing something. Now, if most people, if asked, would say that sentence B sounds better than sentence A. It's shorter, you'll notice, 5 words as opposed to 7 words. It's more direct. It's kind of subject, verb, object. It's simple to follow. Now, here's the passive voice. Passive voice may be preferable if you want to avoid responsibility. It's a lot easier for me to say to a client, unfortunately, your papers have been lost, rather than to say, using the active voice, unfortunately, I have lost your papers. So the passive is used a lot to avoid blame. Mistakes were made. Much easier for me to say mistakes were made than to actually admit I have made mistakes, right? And that, as you can see, is the double passive. It doesn't say who made the mistakes. Mistakes were made by me. I've used the double passive because I don't want to say it was me. I want them to think it was somebody else. Okay, lawyers do it all the time, I'm afraid. Now, here we are. Well, you have to tell me, let's have a look at these sentences. Is this sentence active or passive? Number 1, put A or P in the chat box. Jackie argued the case for the plaintiff. The plaintiff is the person bringing a court case, making a complaint. Jackie argued the case for the plaintiff. Is that A for active or P for passive? Or just speak, whichever you like.
Passive.
Well, it's active because it tells us who's doing it. There's the subject, Jackie. There's the verb, argued, and there's the object. Jackie argued the case. And here's the rest of the information. Who did she argue the case for? Well, for the plaintiff. Right? Right, what about number 2? Is this, let's just see what's in the chat box. Active, well done, Vitaly, yeah. The judge warned John, profanity is swearing, using bad words, all right? Saying bad words. Right. The judge warned John not to use profanity. What's that? Active or passive?
Active.
Active.
Yes, active, because we've got a subject there. Then we've got the verb, right? Now, what about number 3? Cited means charged, summoned. John was cited for contempt by the judge.
Passive.
Yes. By the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning, if we come across words like this, cited, contempt, profanity, if you have any questions at all about the meaning of the words, tell me, because probably everybody will have a question, and I can explain the meaning of the words, and in that way we can increase your vocabulary. Any question? Anybody?
What is profanity? And
profanity means bad words, swearing. I'm not going to swear actually, but you know what a bad word is, okay? That is profanity. Profane language, which means language which is not permitted in a church. It is profane, profanity, you know, swearing. Cited means charged, if you like, by the court. Contempt is not showing respect. Lying to the court, swearing at the judge, using profanity in the court, that would be contempt of court. Yeah. Right. What about number 4? Is this active or passive? The judge ruled in favor of the plaintiff.
Active.
That's active again, yeah, because we know who did it. Now, what about number 5? The decision was written by Judge Johnson. Active or passive?
Passive.
Good. Now, here's a trick one. James Davis was appointed to the Supreme Court.
Passive. Passive.
Very good. Does everybody agree it's the passive?
We
Can you
didn't
tell me
know
why?
who
It's
did
well,
it.
whoever said passive, why is it the passive? It's very good.
Because
Why
we
is it?
don't know the person who did it with him, who appointed
That's
him.
it.
We don't
Exactly
know.
right. Exactly right. Okay. What about, let's jump ahead to number 8. The job was completed on time. Is that active or passive?
Passive.
it's more active.
Active.
Well, it's, you see, when you say it's more active, who did it? Who completed it?
We
don't
don't
know.
know. It is
So
passive.
that's why it's the passive. The job was completed on time by the partner, by the associate, by the worker. It's the passive. Yeah? And this, number 9, the brief was revised by her boss.
Passive.
Yeah, because it's her boss that did it. Right. Now, here's something a little more challenging. I need you now to use your knowledge of the world and use your knowledge of the law to tell me who it is that has completed the action. Right, let's have a look at number 1. An answer must be filed within 20 days after the filing of the complaint. Right.
Plaintiff.
Now that's the passive, right? Because we don't know who's.
Right.
So what? Now this time though, I want to volunteer. Who can tell me who's going to file the answer?
Plaintiff.
Well, it's an answer to a complaint. The complaint is made by the plaintiff. This is an answer to it. So it wouldn't be the plaintiff. Who would it be? It would be the other side, wouldn't it? So who would that be? Now, don't say the lawyer, all right? I want to know which side in the court, in the case.
The responsible authority.
Yes, so in a court case, somebody files a complaint. They start a court case by sending the papers to court and making a complaint. They are the complainant or the plaintiff, yeah? What's the other party called? Well, it will be either the defendant or the respondent, right?
The respondent.
Yes. So who's going to have to file an answer?
Respondent.
The respondent.
That's it. The response. So who can give me the entire sentence?
Excuse me.
The
Yes.
respondent must
Good.
must
File.
file the answer within 20 days.
Good. That's it. The respondent must file an answer within 20 days after the filing of the complaint. Good. Right. Let's go to now number 2. Is this active or passive? A plaintiff must file a reply to a file means to put the papers in the correct place, to take the papers to the correct office, to put the papers in the correct place within the office, in the file. Yes. Number 2, a plaintiff must file a reply to a counterclaim. When, let me just deal with this vocabulary first. When somebody makes a claim, a summons, a writ, they make a claim. When the other party says, I want to claim against the person that's claiming against me, we call this a counter claim. Yeah. Counter is from Latin, contra, against, counter claim. So it's a claim made by the defendant against the plaintiff, against the complainant. So that's the active voice, isn't it? Yes? Right,
Yes.
now, let's go back to, remember number 1. Is this sentence number 3, is it active or passive? Affirmative defenses must be raised in the answer or they are waived.
Passive.
Passive, 100%.
Right, it is. Now, can we turn it into the active? Again, who would have to do this? Who would raise these affirmative defenses?
Defendant.
Yes. So can you give me the entire sentence? Because, yeah, go on, yes, the.
Defendant must raise affirmative defenses in the answer or they are waived.
Good. Affirmative means to confirm that it is a defense. Good. All right. Right. Okay. All right, let's move on to something else. Okay. I'm going to send you a lot of home tasks on that, which you're going to complete, and I'm going to send you the answers so you can check your answers. Right. Now, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to write with verbs. This is what we call nominalizations. Americans call it smothered verbs. What it is, there's a verb there, but we've changed it into the noun for the name of the process. It sounds very pompous. It sounds like you're making a public speech. We write as we write as we speak, but when we do this, it sounds like we're making a speech in court. Not at all. It takes too many words. It's very pompous. Lawyers, for some reason, native speaking English lawyers, all over the world we do this. It's bad practice. It makes it sound very pompous. For example, when we turn the verb into the noun for the name of the process, we say it has been nominalized, or the Americans call it buried verbs or smothered verbs. And this process is called nominalization. So, for example, lawyers don't complete a matter, they achieve completion of the matter. They don't introduce people, they make an introduction of people. They don't provide payment, they make provision for payment. And they don't investigate a matter, they cause an investigation to take place. Well, it's much easier to use the verb, isn't it? So, the problem with nominalizations for your writing is that they're often used instead of the verbs that they come from. And because of their names of things, rather than verbs, because they're nouns, it sounds like nothing's happening. Clients hate this. They want the idea that you're looking at the file every day and thinking about it. They make your writing very dull, very heavy. Nobody will want to read your writing all the way through to the end because it's so heavy. So here's a little one here. we had a discussion about the matter. Now, this time, I want you to write in the chat box this time, what's the sentence? We're going to turn discussion back into the verb. It's the past tense of the verb to discuss. So what's the sentence? It's the active voice. So what's the sentence going to say? I want you to write in the chat box for me and just send it through to me, okay? Good. Now, this is not a race. And let me say this, don't be afraid about making mistakes. If you could do this without making mistakes, then I wouldn't have any purpose. So be kind, make the occasional mistake just to make me feel that I'm doing something worthwhile. Anybody else going to send me an answer? I'll give you another 10 seconds. Good, thank you. Let's see what we've got as answers. Yes, we discussed the matter. Good, Vitali. Good, Vika. Valeria, well, the discussion about the matter took place. Well, what you've done, you've kept it as a noun. So what I prefer, we're going to turn it into the verb to discuss. And it's the past tense. So with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. By turning it into the verb, we'll shorten the sentence. We discussed the matter. 4 words. Right, this next sentence is in the passive voice and the verb has been nominalized. Let's put it in the active voice and turn the noun back into the verb. The implementation of the program has been done by the team. So who's done it? The team. That's the subject, isn't it? What have the team done? The team has what? Just finish that sentence for me. The team has what?
Done.
Well, not so much done. Let's go to implementation. Let's turn it, that's a noun. Let's turn it back into the verb to implement. The team has
Implemented. Yes.
good. And what have they implemented?
The program.
Good. So look how much we've shortened it. 6 words from 4, 6, 8, 11 words down to 6. And much easier to follow, isn't it?
Yeah, much easier.
Much easier. Team is implemented. Well done, Valeria. Team is implemented. Vika, good. The next thing we're going to look at in our next lesson is, in fact, the use of definite and indefinite articles and zero articles. I know that speakers of Slavic languages find this a difficult topic because they don't exist within the Slavic languages. So I think it will be very useful for you, and we'll spend about half an hour of that in our next lesson. So avoid nominalizations, okay? Especially in general correspondence. Make it the actual verb. Now, the next thing is this. If you're going to use a verb, I want you to try and expand your vocabulary. I'm going to suggest that you all invest in an online thesaurus. Let me just write this word down here. A thesaurus. This is a particular kind of dictionary. It gives you the word, and then the meaning of the word, and then the origin of the word, and then, even better still, it gives you all the synonyms. Because what I want you to do, there are, unfortunately, 346,000 words in the Oxford English Dictionary. It is believed that graduates from Oxford and Cambridge University have vocabularies of around between 45 and 50,000 words, meaning there are 300,000 other words out there which nobody's using, well, which not many people use, but they're there. For example, Sesquipedalian language. Sesquipedalian, what a great word. It's Latin, it means 1.5 feet in length. Sesquipedalian language means words which are 1.5 feet in length, words which are just too long to be understood. Okay, a jollop. Can anybody tell me what a jollop is? I doubt it, because it's a word you won't come across very often. I can't imagine why on earth people would even, why a language would even have this word. A jollop is the noise made by a turkey. Gobble, 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 gobble. That was a jollop. And to make that noise is the verb, to jollop. The point is the English language is so incredibly rich, we got words for things we don't even need. So it's very, very difficult. That is why rather than try and, you can't learn 346,000 words, nobody could hold it in their head. But if you use a thesaurus, you'll be able to take a verb that you intended to use and then find the more precise verb. By being precise with the verb, we use fewer words in the sentence and it's more specific, like this. The diplomats worked at normalization of relations between the countries. Is that what diplomats do when they're at work? They work at things. They work at normalizing things. I don't think so. I don't think there's any such word as normalization. It's an Americanism. So they don't work at things. What the diplomats did was the diplomats tried to normalize relations between the countries. Or here's a better version. Here's a better example. The two cars drove, that's the verb, drove at a fast pace. We have to say how they drove, so we say at a fast pace. And then we have to give more information because the verb doesn't tell us enough. They drove at a fast pace down the road as they each tried to outpace the other. They each tried to go faster than the other. So the two cars drove at a fast pace down the road as they each tried to drive faster than the other. What does it sound like they were doing? If two cars, each one is trying to go faster than the other, what would you call that? Well, they're racing, aren't they?
Yeah, racing.
That's right. So let's use that verb instead, because it describes more clearly what was happening. The two cars raced down the road. Now, by being precise, by thinking, by taking the time to think about what I wanted to say, I can express the idea. Again, it's in the subject verb object sequence, you'll notice, but I can express it in far fewer words, and it's more descriptive. The two cars, they're the subject. Raced, verb. Down the road, object. Right, now then, here's a little exercise for us, okay? What we've got here is a nominalization, importation. That is the noun for the process of importing, to import, which means to import, export. To import means to bring goods or things into your country, to import. So what did the company do? The company what?
Import.
Good.
Import.
Good, absolutely right. Can you give me the whole verb? The company imported what?
What means fine?
Fine china means very precious, very delicate, very expensive. The cups that you can see through. China, porcelain.
The fine china goods.
Okay, the company imported fine china or fine china goods. Company imported fine china. Shorter, more precise. Right, next one. His crime was a big surprise to his friends. So it was more than a surprise. That's the noun, to surprise. Well, good. It's more than a surprise. What's more than a surprise? It was a big surprise. So what's more than a surprise? Anybody?
Shock.
Good. Yeah. His crime
Shocked his friends.
Excellent. Next, very simple, right? This is very simple.
He
Excellent.
shouted to the
Yes,
crowd.
he shouted to the crowd. Mac gave a lecture to the court. Let's turn lecture from a verb, from a noun, into a verb. It's the
Mac
past tense.
lectured to the court.
Well, Mac lectured the court, not even
Lectured the court.
That's it.
At
Mac
the
lectured the court. Yeah. Now, what I'm going to be showing you, and we've seen it a little this evening, is some techniques to cut down on the number of words you use in a sentence. It makes the grammar easier. It makes it more precise. You'll get more work done in a shorter period of time, and there's less chance that you'll make a mistake before you reach the end of the sentence. Sometimes, some of these techniques will just take one word out of a sentence. But like the last sentence here, it's only got 11 words. And if we take one out, I've cut it down by 9%. So here it is. The court found that the company had committed discrimination against women. Discrimination is the noun. Let's turn it into a verb. The court found that the company what?
Had discriminated women.
Well, against women. Against women, okay?
Against
Remember
women.
that preposition, against. We're going to look at prepositions as well in about 3 or 4 lessons' time. But the court found the company had discriminated against women. Now, I've only cut out one word, committed, right? But it's cut the sentence down by 9%. So by writing with precise verbs, you'll shorten your sentences, creating greater impact. So again, I'm going to send you a little exercise on that. Right, now, this is just our first lesson. We're going to look at a lot of things about basic English. We're going to have to deal with prepositions. But before we deal with prepositions, I want to deal with definite and indefinite articles and the times when we don't use any articles. Because I know, as non-native speakers of English, this is not part of your language. Whereas I struggle trying to learn Ukrainian, I know that even those of you who speak English well have difficulty sometimes in working out whether to use an article and whether it should be a definite or an indefinite article. So we'll look at that in the next lesson. Now, let me just stop sharing for a moment. Right, I want to know, has anybody got any questions or comments on anything we've looked at this evening? And in particular, I'd be very interested to know, was it too easy, too difficult, or was it just right? What do you think? Now, be honest with me, because otherwise I'm just wasting my time. When anybody gives any feedback on our courses and said, oh, everything was great, that's no use to us whatsoever. What we want are complaints, things that we can then improve. So was that too simple, too advanced, boring? What do you think? Vika, you're on the screen at the moment, so I'm going to get you to speak first.
For me, it was not boring, definitely. It was not very hard, not very simple. It was interesting. It was useful because I feel huge difficulties exactly in writing.
Okay, thank you. So it's about right, okay. So Maxim, what about you? Was it about right or too simple or too difficult?
This lesson was a bit difficult for me because I don't have so high level of English,
Okay.
and I didn't understand everything. But it was interesting for me because I knew a lot of interesting information about structure in the sentence.
All right, okay, good. Katerina, what about you? Was it too simple or too hard or what?
It's not simple, not hard. It's middle, but some words I didn't understand, so it's not a problem. I hope in the future it will be better.
Okay, now when you come across words, everybody, when you come across words you don't understand, tell me, because part of my job is to explain them, okay? All right. Deanna, what about you? Was it about right or? You've got
Yeah,
strong
it's
English.
very interesting and not very difficult.
Yeah.
But maybe if we have before some terms like, for example, climb,
Yeah, I'm going to send you some
counterclimb.
vocabulary before the lessons.
Before we
Okay.
read, and then
Yeah.
my understanding be better.
That's an excellent idea, especially as you're going to have to deal with legal Latin.
Yeah.
Res ipsa loquitur, locus in quo, things like this. Tort, and Norman French, tort feasors, bailees. Okay, good idea. Thank you. I made a note of that, Diana. Irina Glotova, what about you? Was it okay? Too hard, too easy?
Thank you. Yeah. It was amazing. I'm so appreciate you that you promised to send a presentation for us, because for me, like for a person with a visual type of thinking, it will be important to compare everything I thought with a written form. So, and it was rather interesting to have these historical moments which you told about Latin and other nominations on the words. So it was rather interesting. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, look, Natalia, you speak English very well, I've noticed. Was that a bit too easy for you?
Thank you for this lesson, and it was not easy.
Good.
It was not hard. It was very interesting, but I understand for me one of the problem it use this knowledge in practice. That's why now I understand all, but for this moment I can't understand how you see this in practice.
Oh, okay, well,
You know, I understand that I need more practice and use this knowledge in practice, maybe read some literature and
okay, well, I'm going to send you plenty of home tasks, everybody.
yeah.
Because the more, I mean, there will not be difficult home tasks. They're repetitive, so you get this correct English into the tape in your brain, so you just use it automatically when you're writing. Okay. And Juliana, what about you? Was it about right for you, or?
Thank you so much for these lessons. It was interesting, but due to my not high-level English, I didn't understand some words. But
Okay.
I think if I can, it will be good to have a presentation of this lesson.
Yeah, sure.
When I read it, I understand much more, because I can translate some words, some construction of these words. That's why it will be good. Thank you so much. But it was very useful and very interesting.
Okay. Well, now I just wanted to. Does anybody? Well, let me rather because it take too long to go for everybody. Did anybody find it too easy?
No.
No,
Okay. No, Valeria, Vika, no.
Not here.
not
Okay.
yet.
All right. Did anybody
Ma-
find it, Katerina? Did anybody find it too difficult?
No.
Not
Okay.
maybe
Well,
sometimes.
I think Deanna's suggestion, I'm going to send you vocabulary before the lesson. I'm going to send you the presentations, I think, before the lesson as well, so you can look through them and we'll be able to go through the material more quickly. Now, I have something else. I'm going to do something very bad, all right? I'm going to breach somebody's copyright. Let me show you something. Let me share my screen again. I'm going to breach somebody's copyright. I don't want you to tell them because I'll get into trouble. Let me go to this. Here is a really good textbook. It costs about $50 US.
I had this book. I was studying with this book. Very, very good book.
It is a very, very good book. Okay. It's at kind of two levels, a basic level and an intermediate level, or a pre-intermediate and an upper intermediate level. Now, I'm going to send it now. Right now, Catherine Mason, who runs this company, okay, makes a living out of writing these books. and selling them. And I happen to have a copy. So I'm going to share it with you, okay? Don't you tell her what I've done, because I'll get into terrible trouble with it, all right?
Okay.
It's full with exercises, and we can use the exercises. We can use the exercises in the lessons as we go through the vocabulary. We can practice speaking. We can look at what we call collocations, vocabulary. Let's have a look. Gap fill exercises on a lot of different areas of the law. And tolls, which this book leads to, the tolls exam is a very, very popular exam, and employers often look to see whether you've passed the tolls exam, to see whether you can work in English without them having to check your work all the time. So we're going to be using this book in our course, as well as the other material from our contract drafting course and other things as well. All right, everybody. And has anybody got any questions they want to ask me about anything we looked at this evening? No? Okay, all right. In that case, we'll finish for this evening. Now, normally I would suggest that we have a lesson on Tuesdays, but this Tuesday next week, I'm going to be traveling. I've got to fly off to Albania. So I can't have a lesson on Tuesday, but we'll have a lesson, if it's all right with you, on Wednesday evening next week at the same time. Will that be convenient, everybody? Let's have a look.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah?
I think yes.
Will be convenient.
Okay. And don't forget to look, see if you can, don't forget to see if you can download a free thesaurus from the internet. Be very useful for you, a thesaurus. Yeah. Okay. And thanks everybody for joining in. Thank you, Juliana, for your nice comment. Right, I've finished. I'll relax now.
Thank you very much.
No, you're
Thank
very
you so
welcome.
much for
Thank
interesting.
you very
Well,
much.
You're very welcome. I hope that you all manage to settle here and that you find employment and you're able to be part of our country. Our country grows richer from having highly educated people come to live here. And you all want to contribute, so I'm very happy to welcome you. All right, thanks very much, everybody. I'll write to you tomorrow with a copy of the recording, and I hope to see you again on Wednesday of next week. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Natalia, can I ask you just to stay on the line for a moment? Yeah? Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to have a word with Natalia about something to do with Bristol, where I am now. Thanks.
Sorry.
Natalia, I know you're going to London, is that right? Each week for your work?
Yes. On this week, I traveled to London on Monday. It was my first day in new job, and I work part-time, one day on London